This is how we increased our net worth from a 400 over 1,000 BTO flat to a $2.91 million private property. I want to share with you that it took us 12 years to do it. It is not an overnight process, but here's how we did it, and I hope you gain something out of it. I'm Sarah X from Miracle Homes, and today I'm going to share with you our honest journey of upgrading from HDB into private property. Now, it is kind of the Singaporean dream for many people where we say we buy the BTO from HDB, we make this big cash profit, and then we use that cash profit and then somehow are magically able to afford a private property. I want to show you exactly how we did it because nobody is very transparent about this. Right now, where we're staying in with this beautiful place that I'm sitting in front of you was not something that we could achieve overnight. It took more than 10 years of this journey. In fact, I think it would be closer to 13 or 14 years from the time we started our home ownership journey. If you're thinking that this is something that we could just do with easily, it is not. The first thing I want to tell you is that if you are in a serious relationship, let's say you are already engaged, even if you're still studying, I would highly encourage you to start applying for your BTO ballot. I balloted for my BTO in my student years, and the reason why was because I was already married and with a child earlier on in life, and that is true. There are so many reasons why you should apply as a student. First reason why is because you will get these massive subsidies because you don't have the income, enhanced CPF housing grant. If your average household monthly income is not more than $1,500, i.e. you're kind of both students or you haven't started work yet, the enhanced housing grant is $80,000. That is a lot of money. In our time, it wasn't even that much, and the limit was $2,500. It happened that my husband had a job that paid him exactly $2,500, and so we qualified for the maximum grant at the time of an additional $30,000. $30,000 is a lot of money, and now it's gone up to even higher at $80,000. At the time, if we had that same amount of income, we would have gotten $70,000 grant free from the government. Put this into perspective, a BTO flat can cost anywhere as low as $200,000 to maybe as high as $500,000 to $600,000. So if you are getting anything in the lower end from let's say $300,000 to $400,000, a $70,000 or $80,000 grant is almost 25% of your flat already paid for by the government. That's just unimaginable. For us, our flat was $460,000 over and we got a $30,000 grant, so that was very helpful. And at the time, we didn't need to show that we could pay for the $460,000 flat yet. This is the interesting thing. The BTO would take 5 years to build, but we get the grant dispersed upfront at the beginning, even before we collect the keys. But they only assess your ability to pay the loan of the house at the point just before key collection. We would have had to submit our income documents to prove that we had enough money to service a loan, which would be 80% of the entire flat with our income. Getting a BTO, especially if you're just starting out, is really good because you get all this amount of grant from the government, and you also get to have that delayed income assessment. You have 5 years to increase your earning capacity to the point that you can actually pay off that 80% loan on a monthly basis. If you don't know, HDB will only allow you to pay up to 30% of your monthly income. You cannot be using more than 30% of your monthly income to pay your mortgage for an HDB flat. Just to keep in mind, this is actually a lot higher in the private sector because when you use a bank loan, the total debt servicing ratio is actually 55%. But in HDB, it's a mortgage servicing ratio, you call it MSR, that's only 30%. We basically got this amazing grant, which you can as well. If you are still studying or you haven't started work, go for that grant. It could pay off for almost a quarter of the cost of your flat if you're buying a $300,000+ BTO flat, and you will have to wait, sadly, that 5 years. So you must be prepared. If you want to get married earlier than those 5 years, you must be prepared to have somewhere else to stay. That usually means, for most people, staying with their parents. We did stay with my parents for a total of 9 years. We only moved out from staying with my parents when we had the flat ready. Of course, it was a major sacrifice for everyone involved, including my parents, because they had to accommodate me, my husband, and my daughter. They had to even build an extra room. There was also my brother and my sister at the time. At one point, we built an extra room that was actually covering this entryway area. So we built the extra platform out. Eventually that was taken down, but that was so that my sister could move into that room, and then Inez could have her own little room next to us on the ground floor. There was so much sacrifice for my parents. I'm really grateful to them, but it was also not easy for my husband to learn to live with my in-laws and not feel like he had a space on his own. It's very important to work out all those issues with your partner beforehand, because if you want to be able to get the BTO and you have to wait that 5 years, you need somewhere to stay in the interim. Or keep that in mind. So the next step is you have to be able to service the HDB loan. Make sure that you are getting the right income income so that when they assess, we're not going to lose the HDB flat. Then we get the keys to the flat. Keep in mind, you have to set aside some budget for renovation. I mean, there are lots of renovation Instagram accounts right now that are showing you how you can hack it, but a minimum renovation budget I would ask you to set aside plus appliances would be $50,000, because washing machines, refrigerators, all these appliances cost thousands of dollars, and then you still have to buy an oven, a stove, all these kind of things, and there's aircon. Appliances alone can set you back by easily $20,000, and then the renovation would be minimally $30,000. We spent roughly around $60,000 to $70,000 on a renovation plus appliances for our HDB BTO flat. After we renovate it, we have to fulfill your minimum occupation period, which in most cases is 5 years. In our case, we had something very unique happen, which was in 2019, we actually expecting our third child, Nadia Joy, and we had gotten this idea in our head that we need a bigger space because the size of the master bedroom was not big enough to put a queen size bed and a cot. Because we had installed some wardrobes at the site, it was literally not big enough. We had also, to have more wardrobe space, built the wardrobe to eat in to our son, who was Leon's bedroom. And so his room was really small. It could only fit a kid's bed. There was a wardrobe there and that's it. And then Inez's room was already filled to the max. It had a full-size piano, a single bed, a study table, and a wardrobe that already had a sliding door, and there was almost no walking space in her room. And we wrote in to try to sell our flat. But because the estate had not reached its entire MOP, meaning that the whole estate, if we sold now, we would have been like the first sale of the Dawson HDB flats, which were the premium things in a very good location. HDB said you will be allowed to rent for 2 years. What we did was that we eventually rented out the place. So we were the first people to be probably allowed to rent out our place out of special circumstances. After we rented out, we, by the miracle and grace of God, took a novation over from one of our friends who was leaving to go to KL at a beauty world. It was actually at UOB Center. For those of you who were following us and wondering where we stayed, we don't stay there anymore, so I can tell you where it was. It was actually above the UOB bank itself. It was a single floor plate and it was very spacious compared to where we stayed. We had 800 square foot in our HDB flat, but we had 1,600 square foot in that UOB apartment. There were 3 very large rooms, of which one was a study, one was a shared kids room, and one was our master bedroom. And there was a nice dining area and a much larger living space, which we had both bookshelves and content creation space with piano and stuff. And there was the utility room for the helper to stay in as well. And of course, enclosed kitchen, which was not very big, but it was what we dealt with. It was such a blessing because this unit never went on the market. We were actually paying a lower rent than what we were renting our HDB flat out for. It was just amazing. It was just a massive miracle. I want to share this rental experience with you because a lot of people think that they had to go from buying to buying, but there is a benefit of renting for a while because you know that you don't have to be rushed to buy something and you don't have to feel like you are hurried to an urgent decision. For most of the 3 years, we had a rather okay kind of cash flow because we were actually getting more rental from our HDB flat for about 1.5 years compared to paying the mortgage. But after the 1.5 years ended, we did have a few months where we hadn't sold our flat. We were paying the mortgage on it. We were not getting rental income, but we were having to pay rent and mortgage at the same time, which was very painful. Thankfully, we sold the flat eventually. We did not exit at the highest point, I must say, because when the estate first launched its MOP, we were not allowed to sell it because we had to then ask for a waiver of our 6 months of MOP that we did not fulfill. And that took a lot of time to get us approved. And by the time it got approved, there were a lot more units in the market and already the tenancy had ended. Glory to God, we still made money. We still sold the flat at $785,000. So considering that we bought it at $460 plus, I think if I remember correctly, our exit cash that we got back was about $280,000 after you paid back all the CPF and everything. We actually got the cash of $280,000 and that allowed us to buy a new car. I mean, it's really funny, but we were then expecting Aaron, who was our 4th child, and we needed to upgrade our car because we couldn't fit everyone with a helper inside. Exiting that not only kind of helped us to fund the next house, but also helped us with getting car upgrade for something that would really fit the family's needs. And even now, because we have 4 children, I mean, 1 in heaven, but 4 here on earth, that car is really the right car for us. We're so grateful that real estate and getting the house at the lowest possible from the government and the BTO level was really the enabler that has allowed us to move on in life. That's why I encourage you as a young person, if you are watching this, to really consider applying for BTO when you're younger so that you have an earlier head start. You see, by the time We finished our rental period, which was after 3 years. We decided to rent for 3 years because that location was very strategic for Inez. Inez used to go to MGS, which is at Bukit Timah, and that rental was only one MRT stop from MGS. It was a literal 15-minute door-to-door journey for Inez. So we decided, you know what, we're going to rent this place until she finishes the O-levels so that she would be able to have that ease of convenience and not waste time traveling going up and down to school. From the time of balloting for the HDB flat, which was 2010, we got the flat in 2015. We moved in just a month before Leon was born, to the point where we moved out of our rental flat. That is a total of 12 years. It was not 10 plus 3 because we had some months that were shaved off because we didn't fulfill the full MOP of 5 years. We actually requested for it to be waived. That's what allowed us to eventually sell the flat. But you can see that the whole journey of us eventually moving into this space where we are right now took 12 years. 12 years is an entire zodiac cycle. If you were born that year, it's your Chinese zodiac again. I would say that it is not an easy thing to do in terms of real estate because you're planning very far and very long term. I want to complete the puzzle by talking about how we then managed to look into our finances to afford this current private property. When we were renting, we already knew that we had to increase our income. One of the things that I did was to start up a new business, and this business was able to actually give me an additional CPF income in addition to my consulting business. So I was doing two businesses. I had a consulting business where we did branding and marketing, and then I had another business that was an e-commerce business called Taijo. Both were companies that I had direct shareholdership and directorship over, and in order to ensure that I would meet the minimum income requirements, we built the businesses both up and made sure that I was paid the amount that we would need as a shortfall to make sure that I could pay as huge a mortgage as necessary, maxing it out. The real thing, apart from that, my husband Mark also started a job in a full-time capacity. He got a new letter of employment and he got a raise from his previous freelancing work by being paid in this company. So it was very helpful because he had now a stable baseline salary. I was using my notice of assessment letters that was maxing out from two companies and having paid quite a lot of CPF as well, that generated the CPF savings inside. With that combination of having two businesses plus a stable full-time job, we were then able to go to the mortgage bankers and get our $2.1 million loan, which is actually quite a big loan to bear, especially now in the current interest rate market. We did have some buffer left in our CPF to make sure we could pay the mortgage for at least about 6 to 8 months without us having to think about it in our CPF. That was the reserve. And then from there, we now have to figure out how to increase our income again to be able to continue to service the mortgage. Planning to be able to give that kind of notice of assessment required me to have at least 2 years worth of notice of assessment because I'm self-employed. And they would be taking the average of 2 years and a hairline cut of 30% to look at what would be my baseline salary. I think it is very important for you, if you are thinking about upgrading to private property, to make sure that you are increasing your sources of income. I had minimum of 2 streams of income that we were doing. In addition to that, we started to also pivot towards creating content and being paid for brands for it. As I moved away from strategy and consulting, we moved a bit into content creation. We continued doing the e-commerce thing, of which I'm winding down slowly now that I'm in real estate and it's too much to be handling so many businesses. But the key principle is this: create as many streams of income as you can as early as possible so that you can have that affordability. Because even if it's not being paid for you in CPF or something that's recorded by the government, if you have a side hustle, something that will earn you a side income, then that's building up your cash portion. For us, we had cash portion that was driven by a few things. One was the savings that we had, the other was CPF, and the last one was the profit from the HDB flat. These were the main components that allowed us to have enough cash, which was the cash plus CPF component of 25%, for us to then be able to afford this private property. I hope that gives you a perspective for you to know that it's not overnight. It's not easy for us to be in this place where we are right now. We're very grateful and immensely just so grateful for God's help, for His grace, and also my parents' support, especially in our early years where they housed us rent-free before we got our HDB BTO. If you like this video, I hope you'll share, you'll subscribe, and you give me a thumbs up. And also you can leave a comment if you have any more questions about our home ownership journey. And of course, if you have a need and you want some advice, I'd be super happy to give it to you. You can contact me and my WhatsApp number is here. I'm Sarah X from Miracle Homes. I'll see you on my social media as well, on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Till next time, I'm Sarah X Miracle.